Welcome to the Family Tree Magazine podcast. This is the show from America's #1 genealogy magazine. I'm Lisa Louise Cook. So when you're talking to your friends or family about genealogy, it's inevitable that the question pops up like, what is a first cousin twice removed anyway? Well, in this episode, we're going to help you answer that and other questions about cousinhood. And that's why I've invited Lisson to the podcast. She's the founder of the Are You My Cousin blog and YouTube channel. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa. It's so nice to be with you again today.
Oh, it's great to have you here. And, we were just talking before we got started that is kind of the question that commonly comes up, isn't it?
It really does. Just this past weekend when I was at a relative's house, it actually came up again. They're like, now, wait a minute. How are we cousins? We know we're cousins, but are we first cousins? Are we second cousins? I'm like, well, no, we're first cousins once removed. And that opened a whole nother can of worms.
Well, I imagine with the name of your website, Are You My Cousin? You probably get a lot of those questions. I know that you've talked about this topic on your site. So I'd love to know, how do you calculate cousin relationships? Do you have a favorite online tool, or is it something that you can just do in your head?
So I guess the answer is yes to both of those, actually. So I really don't try to keep it all in my head because it is confusing, definitely. I think one of the biggest things I learned early on is knowing where to go when I needed help and finding the resources I needed for that. So one of the resources that I absolutely use is a cousin calculator, which is actually at Family Search. So it's this wonderful chart where you look to see which grandparents or which common ancestor that you might have with your cousin, and you can determine, if you are sharing a grandparent, well, you are first cousins. If you share a great grandparent, you are a second cousin. And then if you share those second great grandparents, you're a third cousin. So it just proceeds that way. And that's when you're on the same generation of the tree. But then you get into those removed cousins, as we know. But before we get to that, the other way, if people really want to just do it in their heads, you really can calculate your cousins in your head. I think it's a little more complicated to do that, but you can do that. It's just, I think it's a higher chance of getting it or having an error in your relationships. I think the best thing is really, there's such good charts out there, is to use those charts.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you said that Family Search has a cousin calculator. Do you have to have your family tree on Family Search, or does it let you kind of just pick which the generations are and help you figure it out?
No, you don't have to have a tree there to do that. It's just like in one of their educational units that they have, or one of their blog posts that they have, they have that there, so you can pull that up as well.
Great. I will put a link to that in our show notes for this episode. Okay, so it's going to give us some answers, and we've kind of touched on them: first cousin, second cousin, third cousin. What does the numbers part of cousinhood mean? What's that referring to?
You mean like the first cousin, second cousin?
Yes.
Piece of it. So it's really kind of telling you where you are in the generations, and if you are if you're on the same generation, and then where that common ancestor is. And so that first cousin is your closest cousin. You share a grandparent. That would be your most recent common ancestor with that. And then as you move back through the generations of grandparents, then you keep going one more back. So it's from first cousin to second cousin to third cousin that way. It's a more distant relationship, but you just move back through. It's very mathematical. It just moves right on back each generation.
Okay, great. So when we hear the number like first cousin, we're going to be thinking first set of grandparents.
Yes.
That's the shared one. Okay, so we know who our grandparents are, and then second cousin would be one more generation of grandparents back from that. I love that. That's easy. So then we get into the removed part. Who's removing who? What's happening there?
That's an ongoing joke in our family about the removed cousin, because getting together with my mother and her first cousins for one of their yearly get-togethers, they invited me. They invited me to share the family history, and they kept saying, "Oh, but you're the removed cousin." And so I was like, well, okay, I'm the removed cousin. I was the tall cousin, but I was the removed cousin. So what that means really, a removed cousin means you are just one or more generations off of you're one or more generations off as far as the family tree is related. So you're not of the same generation. One of the examples I give is that one of my cousins, his name is Wally, my great grandparents are his grandparents. So we are cousins. And so he's my mother's first cousin. So we share common ancestors, but we're off by a generation. That they are my great grandparents. They are his grandparents. And so we are first cousins. I'm one generation removed. So I'm one time removed.
So when you say that and you call yourself that, you're referring, when you say first, to still your grandparents, that first generation of grandparents. We are first cousins, but once removed.
But
because
once removed, right.
The other person's generation is different.
Right.
Got it. Oh, wow.
So we're
okay.
And the interesting thing there is I am actually older chronologically. So you can't go by chronological age.
Oh, right. I think we have to stop, and everybody listening is probably like, Lisa, how did you get your family to ask you to come and actually talk about genealogy? I mean, what a thrill for you to get a chance to sit down and actually share what you learned.
It really was. That was kind of the entertainment for the weekend, and it was fabulous. So it was 7 women and myself, and I have grown up with these cousins. They were my first cousins once removed. I've grown up with them all my life. We would attend yearly family get-togethers, and so it's a close family. So I've known them since I was a child. So they were very interested, and they were the ones that I was going to and asking the questions, when I was starting out with the genealogy research. Like, what do you know? What can you tell me? And so I was really fortunate to have this group of cousins, along with my mom, to be able to share that family information. And then, of course, they wanted to know what I had found out. And of course, I told them.
Oh, absolutely. That could be a fun game over the holidays, is if you have a wide variety of relatives that are getting together, do like a cousin matching game, or you have to figure out, which cousin you are removed. But, that kind of fun, pulling out the cousin calculator.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about which generation of grandparents, the first, second, third cousin part. We've talked about what removes us as 2 people are together and one is from a different generation of grandparents. That's how many removals. So is that where we say twice removed?
You could be twice removed. In other words, you are 2 generations off of relationship. Absolutely. So when you would get to the twice removed or the 3 times removed, you're 3 generations off.
We've got even more types of cousin relationships for you right after this. Today's episode is sponsored by newspapers.com. Break down genealogy brick walls with a subscription to the largest online newspaper archive. Did you know newspapers.com has over 1 billion pages of digitized newspapers dating back to 1690? Their growing collection includes papers from the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond. Discover birth and marriage announcements, obituaries, and everyday stories about your ancestors in seconds. Newspapers.com can help you fill the gaps between vital records and reveal details about your ancestors' lives that you can't find anywhere else. Their easy-to-use search feature lets you filter your results by date, location, specific paper, and more. And when you find something interesting, newspapers.com makes it a snap to share it with your family and friends. You can even save it directly to your ancestry tree. Come explore 1 billion pages and make infinite discoveries today on newspapers.com. Use promo code FamilyTreeMagazine for a 20% discount on your subscription. That's promo code FamilyTreeMagazine at newspapers.com. Okay, now, and there are even other kinds of cousins because, as I always say, families are always a little messy, right?
Yes.
What other types of cousins or titles of cousins would we be hearing, and what do they mean?
So there are some other cousin relationships out there because, as you said, families can get complicated sometimes, and There are things such as, and I always have to look these up, guys, because this is difficult to keep straight in my head. But so you might have what are called half cousins. And the first time I heard what that term, I thought, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I don't know what in the world this means." But that means that they share only one grandparent instead of two. Half cousins share one grandparent. So this could happen in a scenario such as a parent and a cousin parent are half siblings. That's really confusing, guys. Or it could be a grandparent remarried and then had more children. So you end up with like a half cousin. You're only sharing maybe that grandparent, but you're not sharing the mother of the children who is the second wife.
Good point. So could you be a first half cousin once removed? I suppose you could, huh?
I suppose you could. Yes, you could.
Yeah.
I think that would be very complicated,
It would be.
but I think you could. Yes.
That's the funny part about this. I mean, a lot of us, I remember my grandmother talking about, oh, well, that's your second cousin once. But, it's supposed to help make it easier when you get together with family to explain the relationship quickly. But I wonder if sometimes it might be simpler to say, well, let's just put it this way. Great grandmother Louise, we're both directly related to her. Something.
That is, that's exactly what I do. That is exactly what I do, because it kind of gets into that. You get to that whole second cousin or that once removed, and everybody kind of goes, yeah, we're just cousins. And then usually what I do, I'm like, do you remember your Uncle Lester? I'm his granddaughter. And that's kind of how we kind of taking that patriarch of the family and putting my relationship in perspective, and then they can have their relationship in their perspective as well.
Yeah. It's remember that it was a video I saw on YouTube years ago, and it's a song, I'm sure every genealogist has heard it, that I am my own grandpa.
Yes, that is adorable.
Kind of the same idea. It can be challenging. And that brings us, of course, to double cousins. Can you be double cousins?
Yes, double cousins. That is, a double cousin is when two siblings from one family marry two siblings from another family. In this case, then, the children of each couple, they actually have the same grandparents. They share both sets of grandparents.
Exactly.
So it can be, and this was interesting. I'm not a DNA expert. I will say that right up front. But genetically, when you have double cousins, my understanding is they share about twice as much DNA as like a typical first cousin.
That would make sense. So if you were to see that and go, oh, wait a minute, that looks like a huge amount, that might be an indicator. Oh, check and see who else is related to who. It's funny. I don't have any scenarios like that I know of in my family tree, but I have friends that I know where the brothers married the sisters.
I'm the same. I don't have that in my tree that I am aware of. I wouldn't be surprised if I really looked a little further back, but I do know individuals who have that in their family.
Well, you bring up a good point, because now that I actually think about it, it is possible. I want to say it was like back in the 1700s, because I would imagine that wasn't so unusual. You were in small communities and there was a limited pool of people to marry. So you could see a lot of that quickly intermixing of families and sisters marrying brothers.
I think so. And I think you see probably maybe more instances of, say, the half cousins where, if a couple, has children and the wife passes away, we do see instances, and I've seen this in my own family, where the husband marries rather quickly her sister,
yes,
a younger sister or another sister, because they need help taking care of the children and on the farm. So I would see, I've actually seen that. I've seen that in my tree, whereas I haven't necessarily seen the full double cousin.
Well, that actually has a biblical background to it. There was an obligation to take care of the widow. So, that's right. Very interesting. So you mentioned DNA. Does DNA have the ability to tell us the exact cousin relationship based on the amount shared?
So I think it can be a really good indicator, but the further back you go, and on that cousin chart, when you're getting into second cousin once removed or third cousin once removed type things, there are other options. So what I think it can do is help narrow down perhaps maybe 2 or 3 different ways that you might be related. as far as your cousin relationship, but because there are some that will share similar amounts of DNA. So in other words, I have one of my matches that I was looking at this week. We share 1.6%. So it's a very minute, a small amount of DNA. So that could be, from what my understanding is when I looked at it, is that it could be a second cousin's child, or it could be, let's say, a third cousin's child. Those are very close when it comes to when you're looking at the DNA centimorgans. So it's not going to give me an exact, this is who it is, but it would give me, say, okay, these are the probabilities, and let's take a closer look to see if I could figure out where the match actually is on what generation. So it could be definitely more of an indicator, but it may not tell you exactly what degree cousin you have.
Exactly. When it comes to DNA, it's always in combination with the tree we've built, with the records that we have, and pulling it all together.
Yes, you can't. DNA is wonderful, but you really have to have the traditional research. It goes hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Did I miss any kind of cousins or anything else to talk about when it comes to cousin relationships?
I don't know. I'm thinking, I think that covers most of how we would have the relationships. I think cousins are very special. I think these days we definitely are, as we start to get into it, it's wonderful fun to get into the actual number. But I think at the end of the day, it's about connection and just having that cousin relationship. I know I have a lot of cousins, a lot of extended family, and I even have to sit down and really think through, okay, exactly which degree of cousin are they? But at the end of the day, they're just my cousins.
Yeah, exactly. And special for that reason.
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, I really appreciate you stopping by and kind of helping to clear the field here a little bit when it comes to doing our cousin calculations. I think we can do it a little more clearly now in our head. We can certainly head over to familysearch.org and use their cousin calculator. As I mentioned to everybody listening, I'm going to have a link to that over in our show notes. And I will put a link over to your website. It's lisson.com, LISSON.com. And what can they find from you over there?
Over there, I actually have a blog post over on the website about determining those cousins, demystifying the cousins, and also how to reach out to those cousins. So once you've kind of had those matches and you've kind of demystified about where you might be related to somebody on the tree, I also provide tips on how to actually reach out to cousins that could potentially help you in your research, but are more distant on your tree and that you may not have met before.
I love that idea because I know in my own research, the successes that come from reaching out to cousins, because a lot of times it was my parents or my grandparents and their grandparents who were mailing each other letters and sharing photos and attending the same events. And it's really, really actually kind of cool to be able to get those unique stories that can only come from that side of the family. So I think that is a great inspiration, particularly for us throughout the holidays when we have more of a chance maybe to cross paths with so many of our distant relatives. It's always fun to talk to you. Thank you so much. And I hope we'll see you back here soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Family Tree Magazine podcast. This is the show from America's #1 genealogy magazine. I'll have links to everything that we've talked about today on the show over at the show notes page. And you can find that at familytreemagazine.com/podcast. And there you'll also find a huge back catalog of past episodes full of topics that are going to help you in your genealogy research. And when you stop by the website, be sure to sign up for our free newsletter. That really is the perfect way to stay in touch with Family Tree Magazine and get all the latest and greatest news, plus the announcements of each and every new podcast episode. I'm Lisa Louise Cook, and I hope that you'll come by and visit me at my website, genealogygems.com, and there you will find the Genealogy Gems podcast and a link over to our Genealogy Gems YouTube channel. So until next time, have fun climbing your family tree.